record all this good stuff here, so I don't forget it to hit that button. So
we're a small group. So I had two different ideas of what I could do.
Okay.
So I have a webinar, which I've done a bunch of times, which actually I think is pretty good, but I think you'll be bored to death. So what I did is I cut out at least half the slides in the webinar, and I could present that. Or what I can do is I can present 10% of the total and see if that's interesting enough. Your choice. I don't think anybody likes to see slides running and past them, especially if it's a small group. I can't guarantee you how good the smallest presentation will be because I've never done it before, but I feel comfortable and I'm in a safe space. Everybody's smiling.
You are in a very safe space and with other sprintaholics, right? So we are in the same ball game. We would be happy to
don't worry.
Go on it.
Test with us.
But let's do the smallest, the itsy bitsiest one.
We could do that, and then through conversation we can dive deeper in whatever we feel like, right?
Okay, I think you see my presentation right now. Is that right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Now I'm gonna try to make this in presenter mode and see if it sticks like it's supposed to stick.
It usually does. It usually does.
So so it's all right. It's thinking.
It's thinking. But Bryan, you are among friends here for sure. Carol and Crystal and Deanna are very, very core members of so many of the initiatives and activities I'm part of. So we see each other all the time, pretty much, and and they know a lot about sprints as well. What I think we're all really interested in is actually that, and Bryan, we have a lot in common with you, right? We're all passionate about getting as much outcome and as much transformation as possible in the shortest possible time and all that. But what we are also super interested in is to make sprints more sticky, right? Because we all tend to, when a sprint is over, it's like we fall back. It's like, oh, I'm getting my life back. I don't ever want to do this again. And it's like, and I hear this from clients again and again, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they do start implementing after the sprint, but the biggest risk is when they decide not to, they decide to wait 6 months, and then there's better time and all that stuff. And then I think very little of what we have done actually sticks. So, and we had a great chat, Bryan and me, it's, what is it, a month or two ago already, something like that.
I have a question for all of you. When you run a sprint, what is your client typically buying? Are they buying a solution to the problem? Are they buying organizational transformation? Are they buying?
So we have many different types of outcome on the table with different clients, I would say. I work a lot with large corporates, and honestly, they don't know what they are buying when we get started. They are desperate because they have tried many different types of innovation processes and they fail consistently. And then they come across EXO and they want to try the EXO sprint. And they don't really know what they are going to get until we are like 3, 4, 5 weeks into a 10-week sprint. Then they start to understand it. And then we start to have more specific outcomes on the table and that we can discuss and plan for and optimize the sprint. And it is the change of mindset that we see as the primary outcome, and that's also what the clients start to appreciate. But you never feel your own change of mindset until you're on the other side, right? So yeah.
Because I remember talking with Salim from ExoWorks, and he's saying, look, what they're buying is corporate transformation. And I said, well, actually, if they're buying corporate transformation, it's not what you do in the sprint, but it's what they do after the sprint that matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, well, no, that's not right. I said, but how is it not right? If it's corporate transformation, they're transforming something. And it's not that what you, because I think the challenge that comes up is you bring in good facilitators. You can make almost any team do something for a period of time. The question is, do they continue doing it after you're gone?
Yeah, exactly.
Diana, does that speak to you at all? Does that feel right or does that feel wrong?
No, it feels right. Yeah. Diana, over to you.
Yes, and we just finished the sprint, right? And it was an amazing learning experience. But as Lars said, right, it's over. It was quite intense, right? I was in 2 teams. I love the whole experience, but now that it's over, right? Okay, how do we keep this going, right? Because that's really why we started a sprint in the first place, right? So completely aligned here with you, Bryan.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of context. I promise this is not an advertisement for myself because I have more work than I need right now. So no more work. That's nothing. But what I think is probably interesting is tell you how I ended up being interested in the idea of habits. My background is I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm a kind of a strange type of entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur who believes that the way that you make things succeed is you take away risks until there's no risks that are left, and then the business has to work, which means that I have a pretty good hit rate. I mean, if I look, I have 11 startups, I have 8 winners, 1 loser, and 2 which are still going right now. In my personal time, I teach at a few MBA programs. I think it's kind of fun. I get a kick out of it. I also do research around addiction and innovation cultures. And it's kind of funny how addiction and habits are 2 sides of the same coin. An addiction, you're trying to break something, and habits, you're trying to make something, but it's the same tools on both sides. And in fact, my PhD is around addiction to social media, which is kind of a funny. But my real interest in habits came when I was writing the conclusion to my book. And you know how a typical business book goes. It's the world is going to hell. Things are tougher than they've ever been. But we have the magic formula. If you will just follow our magic formula, the world will be different. And now is the time to get started. And I found myself going into that tone in the book. And actually what happened is I didn't believe myself at the end of the book. And I said, look, there is no magic recipe. In fact, the magic recipe is only there when you can execute what you want to do. Now, I'm going to start with a challenging personal experience. And this is a sprint that I ran with a large chemical company. I can tell you, if you don't share the name of the company was Taminco. It's a division of Eastman Chemicals now. They were overtaken. They had a division of their company which was selling a product called formic acid. Formic acid is the raw material in a lot of industrial processes. And the Chinese had just decided to enter their market, and they were going to sell formic acid at a 40% discount to the current market price. And they were making a margin of 8%. So they said, look, oh my God, what are we going to do? Oh, we'll call in a consultant. And I got there and I said, oh, what are you going to do? You're in trouble because you're in an industrial sector of the business. How are you going to make your industrial supply business something else? He said, well, we'll pay you a lot of money if you can fix this. And of course, glutton for punishment. I said, yeah, well, let's see what we can do. So what we did is we agreed to a 100-day sprint with the company. We spent 2 weeks trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And I think that's an important starting point of any sprint. You say, what do you want to do? And basically what they wanted to do was create a new business model. The reason why they needed a new business model, if they couldn't compete on price, they either had to compete on the services they were offering around their product, or they had to deliver it in a different way. we agreed that we would run a learning cycle every week for 10 weeks, and that I would get 12 to 14 people, depending upon the week, and somewhere between 8 to 10 external people per week to work on the project. So all in all, we're ready to go. Week number 1, everybody starts out excited. Said, yeah, we're going to do amazing things. Monday morning, we start out, we said, this is what we're going to do this week. We said, look, this is all about building ideas, trying to find a new business model. We're going to work on this every day. Every Friday, we're going to run a brainstorming session, trying to develop new ideas. Every day, we're going to do some work around testing these ideas. We're going to bring in people for user testing, if you will. It's different than user testing, because how do you do user testing for chemicals? But basically, it's user testing if you want to use the pilots to validate all the ideas. We're going to run on weekly cycles. Every week, we're going to make sure that we do things right. We're going to kill ideas ruthlessly and keep on developing new ideas until something sticks. And every day, we'll run a 10-minute stand-up meeting. So if you can imagine, this was the startup, and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. The first couple of weeks, there was a enthusiasm. Around the 3rd or 4th week, they said, look, we can't come up with any more ideas. We have nothing left. There's nothing left in our brains. I said, well, come on, we're going to keep on going. Around the 6th or 7th week, we had a corporate revolt, and I had to bring in the management team and said, look, your team is giving up. Around the 8th week, we finally saw movement and change within the organization. And we saw that people were doing what they were supposed to be doing. They were talking to customers. They were talking internally to find new solutions. They were going externally to find new solutions. They were validating ideas, and they were going this amazing process. At the end of this, we identified 4 different ways to reposition their business. I'd like to say it was a brilliant success. Their turnover the year before we worked with them was 140 million. The year afterwards, it was 120 million. However, 140 million to 0 million would be a big loss. The manager said, this is fantastic. You've changed our team. Everything's fantastic. We're going to work and we're going to continue to do this on a regular basis. So what you see is they said, wow, we've got a transformation in our organization. So we did all of this. And 2 months after the sprint was done, we came back, we talked to the company, and everything was back to normal. They didn't talk to external customers. They didn't develop new ideas. They didn't talk to each other. And they spent all their time doing basically the same stuff. They sending emails, working around. And we said, okay, look, this just isn't right. Now, I don't know if you've had this experience, but for me, it's a painful experience because you work so hard to get something to change. And when I look at it, the reality is usually habits don't stick. What happens is we start something new, and 8 out of 10 times we go back to the way we did things before. And, there's different ways to deal with this. And I think, there's one way of doing it is to sort of give up. And I'll take the ExoWork solution. I say, it's normal. These organizations can't change. They'll never change. So what we need to do is we need to innovate outside of their core business because the business is never going to change. What's going to happen is they're going to get killed by the corporate immune system every time. This sounds familiar, doesn't it? I have
almost
there.
Yeah.
What's that?
So it's almost there.
So I have a different view, okay? And I think the view that we have is a lot of times when we think we have a behavior that was a habit, it was never really a habit. What happened is for a short period of time, we got people to do amazing things that they never did before in their life. And it wasn't a habit, usually because it wasn't sustainable. Usually what you were asking them to do was too difficult, and they didn't have the ability to do it, or they didn't have the motivation to do it. Quite simply, it wasn't facilitated. And for me, facilitation, if you think about it, if you want a behavior to happen, You have to, first of all, make it easy, and you have to make people motivated. And the biggest mistake we make as consultants and managers is we think motivation is the winning ticket. But in fact, motivation should always be second place. It has to be, you make it easy for people first, and then you get them motivated to do it. When it's easy, they can do it, then the motivation goes up higher and higher. Second, it wasn't repeated. So what we did is we had this 100 days, but we didn't have a second 100 days.
Yeah.
And it wasn't reinforced. And the question that you have is, how could you do this? You could also, well, actually, it was killed by the corporate immune system. So I think you have one option. Option number one is you say, look, what we're going to do is we're going to run sprints. We're going to change things in the organization, and we're going to go do something else. The option number two, and I think that is the holy grail, that's the thing that companies will pay you an endless amount of money for, is please change my organization and make my organization act different. Make them an innovative group of people, proud of what they're doing, intrinsically happy. Now, what I've done is I've now cut out 60 slides and I've gone to the conclusion. So in fact,
nice.
The way that you make habits, and I can tell you everything you need to know about habit building is in this chart. The first thing that you need to do.
You're still on the first slide, Bryan. Just
I'm still on the first slide.
That's what I see on the screen. Yeah.
So you don't.
I don't see.
Oh.
I know on the left. I know on the left you have the thumbnails there, but we just see slide one. Which is a nice slide. So
what do you see? Do you see step one, identify, two, facilitate, three, trigger? Nope, you don't see any of that. Man, and there were all these beautiful pictures you missed.
But there's a beautiful front page. How to run a habit building sprint. Yeah.
Let's see if I can do this. Okay, you know what? It's kind of good. It's a good test to see if I can. So what do you see right now? You see the front page of this, right?
Yeah, that's what I see. Yeah. Sprints to habits, as easy as 1, 2, 3. Slide one.
Okay, so let's see what happens. So you see that? Let's see what happens.
Bryan, perhaps you shared the specific tab rather than the whole screen. So if you're going on presenter mode, it's not showing us what you're seeing anymore. Okay, now we can see you moving.
So what do you see right now? You see a chart?
Yeah, slide 11. Yeah, step 1 to 4.
Okay, so I'm gonna
just take it from there.
I'm not gonna take any risks on this because I know you see the right stuff now. So
yeah.
And actually, this is the only slide you needed to see, by the way. This is it. This is the whole presentation. So the challenge that comes up, if you want to take a behavior and make it into a habit, the first thing you have to do is you have to identify the behavior that you want to make into a habit. Let me ask you a question. Is being innovative a habit? Is it a behavior?
I don't see it as a behavior. No.
Is leadership a habit?
No, I don't see it as a habit.
You guys are clever, a clever audience here, a clever audience. So most of the time when people say leadership is a habit, innovation is a habit. And in fact, what we look at a lot of time is we look at collections of behaviors and they're a trait. What you need to do is you need to identify the smallest unit of the thing that you want to promote. A behavior is something you can do right now. You can be a leader right now, but it's going to be hard to prove that you're a leader. You can be an active listener of somebody right now, and that's easy to show you can do. So a lot of times what people are trying to do is they're trying to create a habit of something which is only a collection of behaviors. And what you need to do is to separate those behaviors out. And what will happen, and this is quite well proven in the research, is when you start building certain behaviors, other behaviors follow. So you have a swarm of behaviors. When you start listening to people start believing you. And when people start believing you, they start following you and you become a better leader. The second thing you have to do is you say, look, I've got this specific thing that I want people to do. And you need to think about more in terms of facilitating it rather than motivating the behavior. If we were really motivated, all of us would follow our New Year's diet. A lot of times we don't. What happens is the starting point usually is we ask people to do things which are one step beyond what they can comfortably do. They do it several times, they fail once, they say I'm a failure, I give up, and I go off to the next thing. The challenge or the opportunity is to focus on small things that people can do. And when they start winning several times, and I'm sure you've seen this in sprints, when people start being creative, they say, I'm not creative, I'm not creative. But then they start seeing they have sparks of creativity. At the end of the time, they say, yes, I'm a creative person, because they've had several wins along the way. And what you need to do is make sure people are able to do it before you work on motivation. And we oftentimes go the other direction. The third step, and this is probably something that we forget a lot of times. For example, what we do is we want to pay people when they do innovation. We're going to give them a reward. What we want to do is we want to do things that are going to trigger that behavior. But the reality is, for example, paying somebody more is 6 months later than the behavior we want to get. What you have to think about is what's going to make the behavior happen now. What is the trigger that happens? Essentially, what you're looking for is, for example, if you want to eat healthy, the trigger should be that when you open your refrigerator, you have only healthy food inside. If you want to go exercising in the morning, a trigger can be that you have your running shoes sitting in your doorway. So when you walk out, you have to walk over your running shoes. It's what you're trying to do is do things that trick you to take the first step. And the reality is we can be willing and able to do something, but if we're not triggered to do it, we don't do it. And the last part is reinforcement. And if I was going to say the most important thing I've learned over the last year, and I took a training in something called the Tiny Habits Method with a guy named BJ Fogg. And if you ever want to watch a great speaker, this guy's fabulous. And he talks about how the one thing that you need to do better than ever before is reward people when they do the things that you want to do. And the one thing that we do not do well, especially when we're around very capable people, or even with ourselves, we say, oh, that's good, but I should have done it. I mean, when is the last time you stood up in your office and you did a jig and you said, man, am I great? Or have you given yourself a chocolate just because you called up the client? The trick that happens for people when you want to create a behavior, it's the reward and reinforcement that makes the behaviors something sticky within our body. And it's actually, it becomes an emotional connection, and emotion is much stronger than our thought. And in fact, the way that they will describe a habit a lot of times is the things that we do without thinking about them. If you're still thinking about it, it's not a habit yet. It's still a thought process. And what happens is what we do is we feel different, and we feel different, we act different. And here I did an individual coaching session. And for me, it was a confronting moment, because he asked me, what do I do with my clients? And I said, I help my clients succeed. And he said, you got it wrong, Bryan. I said, what do you mean I got it wrong? Of course, I try to help my clients succeed. He said, well, that's an important part of your job. But the more important part of your job is to make your clients feel successful. Because as soon as your clients feel successful, as soon as they feel innovative, they will act more innovative. And when they act more innovative, they become more innovative. So what you're looking at is you change your role around in terms of what you're doing to being a person who creates identity change, and that is the future. Now, the question that would come up is, how does this relate to a sprint? So if we got 4 stages, we say, look, we want to make habits. We have identification, facilitation, triggering, and reinforcement. And effectively, what happens in a traditional sprint is we're pretty good at identifying a big goal, but usually not particularly good at identifying specific behaviors. So I would give a score here of pretty low in terms of identification. We facilitate things. Of course we do. That's what the whole sprint about. It's about getting people to do stuff. It's learning by doing. It's creating the learning mindset. Fantastic. Triggering stuff. During the sprint, we do it. But what do we do after the sprint? Do we have things? Do we keep the daily stand-ups afterwards? Do we keep the demo sessions? Usually not. And lastly, comes the question of reinforcement. Well, you reinforce things during the sprint, but how do you keep it ongoing? And this led me to a point of view and saying, look, you know, maybe what we can do is we can take all these companies that are running sprints right now and try to help them do some stuff before and some stuff after the sprint, because they do a pretty good job during the sprint. And say, look, how would you put this together is before the sprint, identify where is the company in terms of maturity? What are the specific behaviors that they need to change? And try and get agreement on the fact that in fact, we're going to run a sprint, but the sprint isn't done when you drink your beer at the end of the project. The sprint is done 1 year after the project is done, and we see if there's been an organizational transformation. Then we run the sprint, and now what we do is, you know, as Ars was saying, we're done. Fantastic. It's time to go on vacation. I'm off to the Bahamas. I've worked hard enough for this year. And then what we've been doing here is we're working on a reinforcement. And the best thing that happened, I've seen up until now, is to identify the good things that people do. Instead of saying, oh, we achieved this fantastic thing, to start getting really granular and saying, look, you guys did a really good job at communication. You did a really good job of listening. You did a really good job of this. And you start identifying the specific behaviors that you want to praise, but also the things that you want to return over time. And then what you do is work on building what I would call innovation habit recipes. And typically for me, those are stacked habits. It's very hard to get you to do something new out of the blue. But if I was to show my desk, you show I didn't do it. But for example, one of my challenges in life is to have my desk, which is clean. So one of the things I try to do is I create a stacked habit is when I turn off my computer in the end of the evening, I clean one thing on my desk. That's easy. I've got a habit and I do another habit. I can't say that it always works, but sometimes you can teach better than you can do. But what happens a lot of times is when you have one thing and you do another thing, then you continue going. And it's these cues, these triggers that get us to do things well. So what you try to do is within the organization, try to find moments that cue those things. And that's it. So this was an hour-long presentation in about 15 minutes. I don't know if it's interesting or if it makes sense. I see Lars was nodding his head a few times. Diana was smiling every once in a while. Carol was there, and Crystal, I couldn't see you.
Yeah.
Totally agree with Bryan. Yeah.
Does this sound familiar to you though?
Yes, in a lot of projects that I've done, especially during my consulting life. So the client will work very well working on the project, but when the consultants leave, they go back to their bad habits, like not continuing the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, and I think what happens is the big challenge that comes up in life is I think sometimes the better you do your job, the less you earn. Because you want your clients to be in a little bit of pain all the time, otherwise they don't call you back. Or you take a different viewpoint and say, look, actually my job is done when I close the door and they recommend me to the next client. Carol, you're on mute right now.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I remember I did a very large project, and I was like maybe 2 months into the project when I presented to the top management, the executive leadership, that means the board members. I told them that I have failed and I cannot continue on with the project. And they were shocked.
Gosh.
I say, yeah, I say, because your people are just not, I face a lot of challenges, the change of mindset and the habits and the way they were reacting during the project. So I told the client the best is to cool off and then I come back to continue on with the project, because you cannot do a project just for the sake of study, because I strongly believe in implementation. If I feel that I'm not getting enough buy-in to actually get the client to implement after we leave, I actually told the client that I should just stop the project. Yeah. Although I don't get all the free I wanted, but I felt better that way, because if you are doing a project knowing very well the client is not going to implement, there's no point like wasting each other time. Yeah. I totally agree with you.
So,
Very.
yeah. Lars, what do you think about the idea of agreeing up front that it's about transformation rather than a sprint?
I find it very important to prepare the sprint properly, like you all do, simply because we need to find out what's the reason we are doing this. What's the outcome going to be, like you asked in the beginning, Brian? What outcome are we trying to accomplish? And very often, actually, the client doesn't really know, and sometimes they surprise me after the sprint by actually highlighting something they really appreciate from the sprint, and I hardly thought about it, right? But they love that part. For example, they talk to each other across departments now, which they didn't before. And there were triggers in the sprint making that happen. So I'm certainly not selling sprints, by the way. I never do that. Transformation, that's a question mark, because there is usually some specific challenge that causes our clients to call us, right? And it's usually that the revenue is going south very rapidly, and their innovation processes are not working, and they are kind of panicking.
Yeah.
And this is the moment in the history, I think, where we have the most companies at the same time in this situation, which is why we are extremely busy. So what do you talk about? Is it sprints? Is it transformation? It's usually none of the above, really. It is about solving a particular problem. I'm working with a very big public company right now, and they cannot implement new innovative initiatives. They get lots of ideas like everybody else. They always fail when they get to actually implement it. For some reason, everything stops, right? So they have departments doing design sprints and rapid prototyping. They're really good at that. And then everything hits a wall again and again and again. They cannot implement the stuff. So that was what caused this client to call and say, hey, we need to get beyond that wall. And we know it. Otherwise, we're doomed.
But if you think about that context, they have a behavior that they want. They want an implementation behavior, a sense of urgency, a sense of making things happen, discipline, honesty, candor, all these types of things. Don't they want those things to continue after you're gone? Because that you can facilitate that while you're there. But then when you walk out the door, do they continue to implement?
Yeah, in this case, actually, the contract is for multiple sprints, because they also knew from the beginning you cannot just have one sprint and then everything works. You need to repeat it, and the reinforcement is going to be important. So they understand that part. And I agree very much. The first sprint is really an educational activity. This is where we experience, hey, we can do things a lot faster, and hey, we can get up early in the morning, and hey, we can work until late in the evening, and all that. And then after the first sprint, then we understand why this was important. But as I agree to you that we will fall back to our old behaviors if we don't reinforce it. And this is where you need something after the sprint. And whether that's a second and a third sprint, or it's another way to keep ourselves accountable. And I see, for example, coaching as a great offering to keep coach teams. So we have somebody asking those painful questions. Did you get out jogging today? Did you get up early? Did you eat healthy? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're looking is, what do you call it? An accountability coach to a certain extent. You make them accountable for the things that they want to do for themselves. It's like my personal trainer who shows up and he makes me feel guilty because I haven't been running last week.
Yeah. I use that example a lot. Carol, over to you.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think it is best to be to set the client expectation that is not I don't know, we are not here to give you the answer. We are here to provide you with the process, coach you with the process, so that you get to learn a new way of doing things, learn new behaviors, and build certain habits.
Yeah.
I think that is very, very important. But that is what we wish. But sometimes the client also think that, I'm sure, especially when they want to hire a consultant, because they want the consultant to be accountable for the outcome as well. So I think that part need to be managed right from the beginning.
Yeah, no. But I think the opportunity that exists is, for example,
Yes,
if you're doing an implementation sprint, is, maybe the opportunity that exists is saying, look, what we're going to do is we're going to show you in this sprint how to implement things. That's what we're going to do. But what we're going to do is we're also going to identify those things as they come up. And we're going to want you to continue doing them between the time that we run this sprint and the next sprint. And you flag them and say, okay, look, this is what, while you're there, this is the thing that we needed to be working on. Oh, that's really good. And then you start making them aware of their ability to do certain things. I find it's a really complex thing, because sometimes people just want you to get on the job and do it. But I think a lot of times what the real goal is to say, look, I'd like you to help me do it, and I'd like to be able to do it better after you're gone.
Yes, you are right, Bryan. That is always the case.
What do you feel, Diana? Does this feel familiar to you at all?
Yes, very, very much, actually. I think it's something very important. We're actually with Lars working on Planet Pilot Kids.
Yeah.
And we have basically sprints for kids, right? 9 to 12, 13 to 15. And there is a big aspect, and it's the key focus for us now. How can we really build habits, right? Because we're using the sprint as a personal transformation engine, right? But what you mentioned just really struck me, because it's true how, it's a one-time thing, right? But how can we really provide and facilitate actually building habits, right? And changing, and as you said, you mentioned identity change, which it's super aligned. I'm looking forward to hearing. You mentioned different aspects of habit building, and how the sprint is weak on most, right? It's only like the facilitation part. So super eager to hear. You have any ideas? What have you been working on?
So I got lots of stuff I can give you, but what I was going to give you, if you want, here, let's see, it's here someplace. By the way, you should buy this book. It comes out soon. It's going to be really good, I hope. These are some books out there on habit building. And if you want to do the quickest and easiest thing, it will take you about 30 minutes next week, is go to the Tiny Habits website. They have a free program that starts every Monday, which shows you how to build some small, tiny habits in your life. And what's really good is they explain the process of building habits, and they get you to work on 3 habits during a week and seeing if it can happen. And you can copy and steal that process with your clients. And then the other ones here, the one that I think is actually the most interesting for us is a book about training animals. It's about don't shoot the dog. And it talks about training animals and training people and saying, in fact, the more motivated your people are, the better they are, the less likely you are to reward them. And what you need to do is to reward people on a regular basis. And I think that's it. That's my stuff. So tell me what I could do to present this better, or what questions do you have? I can answer anything. I have an amazing amount of knowledge, which I haven't presented, which is on the other 86 slides in the presentation.
All right, I have a specific question about, so the sprint that you're basing your great presentation on, Bryan, what behavioral challenges did you see in that sprint that you wanted to
Every
change?
single one that you could imagine.
Okay, okay.
No, if I was to, this is something I did about 2 years ago. I wasn't thinking about habit change. I was just thinking about how I can help them save their company. If I was going to do it again, right now, what I know, I would do it very differently.
Yeah.
Essentially, the biggest issue I took is I led too much. And when you lead, you don't teach other people to lead. And I think if I was going to do it again for that company, I was trying to create a long-term change in the organization. I would rotate leadership so they lead the meetings. I would be a much more of a coach rather than a doer. I would let them fail more often because one of the things that happened is they didn't do their work, and then we would have people work over the weekend to sort of catch up for them. And I would say, look, you didn't do it, present it to your boss. And then you start developing a different type of accountability. And at the same time, I think the company really liked the fact that we saved them all the time. So for this project, I had 20 internal people. I had 10 PhDs around the world, people with PhDs in chemistry, working freelance for them during the project. And those people I could be really mean to, and the client I couldn't be really mean to. So you had this process where regardless of what they did, they were going to succeed. So if I was going to go back, I'd let them fail a little bit more.
Right.
That's probably not the right answer, is it?
What, I don't know, what culture was that? I mean, geographical culture.
It was a Finnish company. So it was a Finnish company with a headquarters in Belgium. So the production was in Finland.
Okay.
I don't know. Lars, you're Swedish, is that right?
I'm Dane. I'm a Danish.
Okay, you know the Finns. They're not the most easy group of people in the world.
Right.
They have a very special
the best education in the world.
No, actually, what the Finns are amazing at is they're amazing at asking questions. I've never seen people from a country that ask questions better than the Finns. But at the same time, you know, creativity was not always their strong point, especially Finnish engineers from the Laplands was not their thing. But, you know, retrospectively, I think what I should have done has been much more clear in terms of, you know, what is the process we're going to follow?
Yep.
So what I did is I planned for 100 days. I didn't plan for 101.
Yeah.
And I think the client would have been better off to pay, you know, 10% more and have us around for another 3-4 months than just ending the project where we did.
Yeah.
And what I'm working on right now, quite hard, is one of the challenges I've noticed in the sprints that I run with companies is a lot of times people do things, they follow the motions, but they don't know why they're doing it. So the idea is a training sprint. So you explain why you're doing this so that when they come to that problem again, they know the context, even if they know the technique, but they also know the context so that they can apply the technique again.
Yep.
Crystal, you haven't said too much. It's dark. Tell me what you have to say. I've lost her.
Yeah.
So tell me about you guys, because I've talked a lot about me. I know Lars. Diana, tell me about you.
Lovely, we have time to chat. I think it's the first time. I'm Diana, Colombian. I'm right now in Miami. I usually live in Beijing. I've been living there for 7 years. It's
You
funny,
speak Chinese?
I do.
Okay.
Seven years. It's a
Oh, you're frozen.
And Diana has a bad Wi-Fi, unfortunately, on most days.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my wife is speaks Chinese. She's Belgian, but she's in charge of the European Chinese Chamber of Commerce. And she's been trying to teach me Chinese. I fail miserably. And Colombian, Colombian, living in Beijing, in Miami. I mean, how much more cosmopolitan can you get?
oh.
And Carol, tell me about you. You're in Vietnam. You're Vietnamese by origin.
No, I am in Malaysia. Krista is in Vietnam.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So my time here is 11:49 at night.
Oh, I feel very privileged that you invite me into your house in the evening.
Anyway, I have been a consultant all my life, and then I quit EY partnership end of 2011, and I joined a government agency, innovation agency. That's when I helped the government to set up the first design thinking school in Malaysia, where I work with the people from the Stanford D School, as well as HPI School of Design Thinking based in Germany. And setting up the design thinking school, that means providing training for our local fresh graduates. And I was also involved in the education. I facilitated one chapter of our Malaysia Education Transformation Blueprint. So that's why I'm also very passionate about education, especially when I started to work on design thinking. And I have also learned a lot about innovation can be learned, as long as you can work with people and, how to associate and how you can collaborate with others. And like you say, fail often and learn from it. And also that time I met Salim virtually and got him to come to Malaysia when we launched the design thinking school, and subsequently I connect back with him and joined the EXO. So I've been like learning about EXO Sprint and try to apply in my client situation now.
Can I ask you a question about Malaysia? I was involved in a project for the European community about teaching entrepreneurship. And they gave an award to the Malaysian university system for making entrepreneurship a required part of the curriculum for all college seniors in Malaysia. So the idea was there was a big issue with unemployment after school. So if you could teach people how to build a business, they learned something that was useful regardless of the job they did. But then it also gave people new jobs and things. Do you know if they're still doing that in Malaysia or not?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, Malaysia government, right, continue to, firstly, the public university, a lot of them, they will have courses on entrepreneurship. That's one, the public university. And at the same time, we also have Magic, a center where the government would put funding to train people to become entrepreneur. That means, you can apply, anyone can participate, and all these programs are fully funded by the government. So when I was running the design thinking school, also the entire program fully funded by the government for all fresh graduates to learn about design thinking so that they can be better innovators that complement their tertiary education. Yeah, we continue to have a lot of funding for training and also for unemployed graduates, fresh graduates, unemployed fresh graduates. But unfortunately, due to our funding, has been like I would say our government income has been diminishing. I think they would cut some of the funding, but they would not cut, they would cut the funding, but yet they still continue to fund the program. But because of COVID-19, they have begun to try to ask the training provider to provide this kind of training online. Yeah.
Can I ask your help with something? I talked to Lars about this idea. So I've decided I want to create a training program in remote innovation management. Okay, so how do you train managers to manage innovation remotely? And I came up with what I call is the bicycle theory of training. So how do you teach somebody to ride a bicycle? You don't give them a book, you don't do a lecture, you have them get on a bicycle and ride. So the question that came up for me is, how could I run a training program where people actually get to manage remote teams? And the solution we came up with was to train people in different countries around the world, specifically India, Pakistan, Holland, Belgium, maybe Malaysia. So we train them for a period of time. We give them a free course on remote innovation, and then they participate in the sprints from the companies. And the companies basically pay for their education. Do you think that could be interesting in Malaysia?
Companies pay for the education.
So essentially what happens is the students get the program for free. So they do a certification program. And then there's Western companies, typically, who want to have a team that can work on a problem. And then we match them up together. So all the are paid for by the company, and the students get educated for free. And I think it's a cool idea, actually.
Yes, it's a brilliant idea. In fact, we would need to, we have to find a way to get the university willingness to work together. But if, let's say, we know that the companies are outside Malaysia, they may be keen to participate.
Yeah. So I think what happens is a lot of people locally would like to work for a Western company.
Yes.
And the Western companies want some certainty that these people could work in a remote context. So the fact that we have them work remotely beforehand and certify them, they're more employable and they're a better participant. So if I think you're in the CC of the email today, but I'll contact you and send you some information. If you could help me, I don't make any money off of teaching the students. Hopefully what I will make money off of is placing the students in the companies.
Yep, sure. You can send it to me, and then we can have discussion in detail. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yep.
So I think, Diana, I think we planned an hour here. I think we're at an hour, so 56 minutes.
Yeah, it's perfect timing.
Could I join you on one of your future presentations? I'd love to hear the other things that you're working on. It's my big passion, if I look where I want to be in the future, is do more stuff in education.
Yay, we're in the same boat here.
You found the right tribe, Bryan.
Yes. Okay. No, but I think when you educate people, you make many things happen. There's only one of me, but if I can educate 500 of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I would love it if you invite me in the future. I can't always join, but I'd be happy to join. And I hope I didn't bore you with my talk today.
No, I learned a lot.
Super interesting topic, and it's very important. We work with human beings that are trying to do things differently, and they often fail, and they need to understand how do we overcome that. And you're pinpointing so many very important factors here that we also as coaches and facilitators need to be aware of and get better at. So this is super interesting, Bryan, and relevant.
Okay.
And what we do in the Educate for Life community is very much also exchanging knowledge and best practices and what not to do with each other, right? So you're going to you will see our different events as they're being scheduled in our platform, and we're happy obviously to invite you. We try not to send that many emails out. I don't want to spam people with too many emails, so this is why the events are in the platform, and usually there is a notification email going out if you have activated the notifications for that.
Okay.
So
So I will look for you again online. And since I'm in a tribe who likes education, I'm actually doing a presentation at ISPIM. Do you know ISPIM?
yeah.
ISPIM is, so I'm presenting how I'm building a remote innovation management training program. In there in about a week and a half. And if you'd like, I'm happy to share it with you. Maybe I could even share it with you before I present it, because I haven't written anything yet and I have to make sure it's interesting when I present. So
Right. I'm sure it will be.
there's always a big doubt, especially when you do it online. I find it so difficult to talk online because you don't feel the contact.
Yeah.
I mean, here in this group, it's easy because you can see all the people and you can interact a little bit. But when
And it's a small group, yeah, you get to chat a little bit. But with the large audience, it's very hard. And with if everybody have their cameras off, it's impossible.
Yeah, that's right.
no, I do on the Wednesday night to 1,000 people.
Oh.
I mean, how do you interact with 1,000 people?
Oh, you can not at all.
You don't.
Anyways, thank you very much. I will connect with all of you on LinkedIn, and I hope to see you again. And Lars, thank you for the invitation. And we do need to do something together. I count on you.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely, Brian. Looking forward to it. Thank you for being here today and sharing your great presentation. So speak to you very soon.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye,
Thank
guys.
you very much, Brian. Thank you, Lars. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Carol.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.